Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first presentation of the day, How to Hack Your First Project. I'm super excited to be here with Darsh from CSOC. He's going to be giving the presentation, so I'm going to pass it over to Darsh.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Hey, everyone. So today I'm going to be giving a talk on how to hack your first project. It's going to be a more general take on projects and how to tackle them right from the ground up. And it's geared towards people who are trying to get into projects and kind of like people who are having a tough time finishing projects and getting to the end, if you may want to call it. So let's get started. I'm Darsh. I'm the VP Academic of CSOC. If you don't know, CSOC is the Systems and Computer Engineering Society, and we basically represent the systems and computer engineering students, and we kind of like a liaison between department students, and we host a bunch of workshops and projects and events related to technology, engineering, and computers in general. So let's get right to it. So why work on projects? So working on projects is kind of like using small building blocks to kind of create a bigger complex system. So using small, simple components to build complex systems, kind of like Lego pieces, where each Lego block can kind of like end up having a huge, you could probably build a whole city with like small Lego blocks. And that's the idea of like kind of like building big things with small components, and that kind of like gives you an idea of how things work. How a bigger system or like things like that work, and it can teach you a lot of different things. It forces you to learn new things that you might not have come across before. It's a completely different type of learning from learning from books and learning from like classes. It's kind of like an applied way, and it's something I love about projects in general. And it can also teach you to work with other people if you are working in a team, which is great. And it also makes you more employable. A lot of companies nowadays really want to find out what kind of passion projects you're working on, and working on projects, getting involved in hackathons like this can definitely help you in that journey of like getting hired in a better company or in your dream company or whatnot. So yeah, so in terms of for the sake of this talk, I'm going to be taking an example that's kind of not really I guess tech related. We're going to take an example of let's say this is you and you're trying to build a house. And the reason I do this is because I feel like this might be a more widely I guess relatable analogy compared to going into like a certain type of project or a certain type of technology to use. So I feel like this will be a more holistic approach and more general approach that might help people like understand how to take on projects in general rather than a specific kind of project. So like everything, the first step is to come up with an idea on what you want to work on. This can sometimes be one of the hardest things to do, getting started and kind of like finding out what you want to work on. And honestly, the best thing to do is look for inspiration. Look for things around in the world with people that things that people have worked on that inspire you, that excite you, and try to see if you can build your own version of it in a sense. So looking for inspiration is a great way to kind of come up with projects. So kind of like always be on the move, trying to see, find cool things that excite you, and then keep track of them, and then you can use that to kind of build your first project. Consider what you want to learn in terms of like if you want to learn a certain technology, kind of like look for projects that might help you do that. That's definitely very helpful as well. And dream small. This might be a little contradicting, but especially when you're working on your first project, it's important that you don't try to like go too big, because sometimes projects can be a little overwhelming, especially if it's your first project. So dream small, take small projects off just to start off with, and then use that small projects to kind of build momentum to work on bigger and bigger projects. So your first project doesn't have to be your masterpiece. Your masterpiece can come eventually. Start working on your first project. Keep it small, keep it simple, and then that'll give you the momentum to keep going. And if possible, work with people as well. That really makes things a lot easier. So step 2 is kind of breaking things down. Once you have an idea, what you want to do is kind of like understand what your project entails. It's like this quote says, like, nobody knows how to build a new project until they've actually built it. So keeping that in mind, start thinking of like, breaking things down into smaller and smaller pieces so that you can actually build those smaller pieces to finally end up with a complete project. And for example, like, when you're building a house, like, you could probably, it's harder to find information on how to build a house compared to, how to nail a hammer into place, and how to nail wood into its place. So breaking things down into like smaller and smaller tasks will kind of like give you a better idea on how to tackle these projects, kind of give you a better understanding of what this project entails, and also make it easier for you to like take those small steps towards making that the final project. So breaking things down is very important, and that's definitely a very valuable step to do. Step 3, identify your core components from those broken down aspects. So once you break things down into all the small components of a project, kind of understand, what's your main component. So there's a lot of pieces that go into building a house, right? There's furniture, there's, building the walls, building the foundation, painting, drywall, whatnot. There's a lot of these things, but like kind of understand, what's the main focus here. You can always, there are a million things that you want to do, a million things that you can add to your project, but you need really, in order to make your project successful and kind of like you really get, a working product out of the bat, you really need to kind of focus on, what's the main component, what's the core functionality of, your project, and what's the simplest way that you can do, simplest steps that you can take to get there. And that kind of leads up to my the next point, which is creating a plan. And more importantly, creating a plan to go from A to B and not from A to Z. That means that, create a plan to go to the next step that will, then from A to B, and then you can move from B to C and so on, and all the way to like Z. Creating a plan from A to Z, almost, it's hard to do that first of all, because, there's a lot of challenges that you might come across as you're going from A to B to C. So kind of like, again, take things in small steps, keep it simple, keep it small, focus on the core functionality, and take that step. One good, strategy here is something called a minimum viable product. And what this is basically kind of like the most simple version of your project that you can create, and the one that like has only the core features that you need for your project. So for example, again, taking the house analogy, your minimum viable product might be like getting something, getting a structure up, right? Like you can't really start furnishing things until you have a certain the structure of the house up. So like building the walls, building the foundation, and so on. So like think about what your minimum viable product might be. Think about only focus on the core functionality. Like all the fancy features and painting and like furnishing and all that can come later. So like create a plan for you to get towards your first step, and then you can always iterate from there. And then once you have a plan, you just got to start. Don't spend too much time planning things. It's easier to get stuck in a loop of like constantly planning, constantly thinking of like how are you going to work on something. Sometimes at a point you just got to like bite the bullet and jump right into the project, and then you just start moving. And so start building and get stuck. Inevitably, you're going to get stuck at some point in the project, and that's part of the learning process in these projects. And that's one of the coolest parts about these projects, and part of the reason why we do them is to kind of like get stuck in these situations, kind of understand. If you get stuck, that means that you're kind of like learning something new. You're learning something that you didn't know before. So like it's important that you get stuck, and that's okay to get stuck, and like push through and kind of start building momentum in your projects. And a couple of things that you can do if you're stuck is reach out to people for help. There's always other people that are probably working on similar projects like you. For example, like in this hackathon, this all the people here in this hackathon are people that are interested or like are willing to like learn through working on projects. So leverage these people that are having similar interests. So reach out to them. Learn to Google. It's one of the biggest skills that us like programmers need to have. So definitely take that on, and also take short breaks. Sometimes all you need to do is take a short break from what you're working on, and you can always come back to it and get started. So if you're stuck on a bug for a whole day, maybe you just need to go out for a run and then come back, and that can really kind of that subconscious thinking while you're on a run can really help you solve problems as well. And step 6, push through, stay consistent. So as you're working on projects, you can see this. Let me explain this diagram here. So it's basically the emotional journey of creating anything great. It's by John Saddington. And the way it goes is like any great idea or any project that you want to work on, as soon as you start, I'm not sure if you can see my, I don't think I have my pointer up, but once you start building, you're thinking like, oh, this is fun. This is, this is really great. I'm having a lot of fun building this. Eventually you start understanding how hard things are, or you start running into problems that, kind of slowly start demotivating you, kind of getting in a spot of do I want to do this? And then you start understanding that it's a lot of work for you to take on. And at that point, you have a choice of either keep going down that that trajectory and kind of landing in a place of just admitting that this sucks and that you don't want to work on this anymore. There are a lot of projects, a lot of people, including me. I've worked on a lot of projects that haven't seen the end of the light at the end of the tunnel, solely because things like this, things start seeming that it's harder than it is, and that's just the nature of building anything great. So instead of letting yourself go down there, take the route of perseverance and consistency. Try to keep yourself motivated and push through. Leverage your family and friends, and kind of use this bridge to get on to the next side where things start looking a little bit more promising. You start thinking, okay, this doesn't suck as much, as you every day that you put every day's effort that you put in helps, and you start understanding that, okay, this is easier than I thought. Slowly, you start seeing results on what you're building, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, this is great. I'm at the I'm closer to finishing my project. So it's important to stay consistent and stay pushing through. Consistency is one of the biggest skills that you can have, in my opinion, towards actually working on something great. Consistency can compound to kind of give you bigger results. So being able to put some kind of effort into your project daily or weekly or something like that, whatever your timeline may be, can really help things progress. So sticking to it and don't let yourself give up on your project. And another great tip is share your progress. It's a great way to kind of get feedback on your project, and especially if it's a project that is community facing, it's for customers or for students or whatnot. It's great to get some feedback on it, kind of understand where your project needs to go, and also talking to people can kind of help you understand problems that you might be facing, and maybe it can also save you a ton of time if you're working on the wrong thing or things like that. So sharing your progress can definitely do a lot. It also increases visibility for your project, which can be great, especially if you're building a product per se that you want eventually maybe make money out of or whatnot. It can increase visibility. The more eyes on your project, the more the better it can be ultimately as well. And also try to document your process as well, because if you're a person that's trying to work on projects and kind of you're not sure, everyone who starts a project doesn't know how to go about it, and that's just the nature of it. So documenting your process and sharing the next person, sharing your learnings to the next person to help them out is definitely a very valuable skill, a valuable thing to do as well. Kind of passing on the torch for the next people, and kind of inspiring more people to do more projects and whatnot. So yeah, step 8, iterate. So once you start working on a project, and then you start seeing that you're able to complete your MVP, your minimum viable product or whatnot, or your iteration, you have a simple product, working, and your project, you're pretty happy with it. There's always room to improve it, kind of iterate. Now that you have a simple version of it, you can always start adding features to it, make it better, get feedback from people that are using it or whatnot, and then slowly make it better than it is. Iteration is so important. So leverage iteration. You don't have to complete everything in the project in one go. You can take small sections of it, complete that, iterate, and slowly make things better. So you don't have to go from A to Z. All you need to do is go from A to B, and then once you're at B, you can plan for the next step. So yeah, so let me point out some helpful resources that might be helpful for you guys today, per se, for this hackathon. Some resources that you probably should know that might help you out, especially today and in general for any projects. Especially if it's like programming, you really want some kind of source code management. If you don't know what source code management is, like Git and GitHub, Git is basically, in my eyes, a time traveling machine in a sense. It kind of helps you keep a history of your code, and it also helps you collaborate with other people as well on the same code base, and then it gives you a really good workflow on working as a team, as well as going back in time to kind of maybe go back to a previous version of your code, so that if you did break something here, go back, start from where you were previously. And in my eyes, it's just like a really great thing for programming in general. Programming projects, it's such a leverage to have something like Git to kind of like give you the kind of like the superpower of like time travel. So definitely leverage that. And GitHub is basically kind of a community for Git projects in a sense. So leverage that as well. You can always find a lot of ton of other projects on there. All you need to do is do a search. You can probably find projects similar to what you're working on, and that's a great way for you to like kind of understand how to like work on something. You might be stuck, and this is also another way you can do kind of like figure it out. Maybe someone has worked on a similar project. You can go through their code and kind of understand like how things work, and then that can definitely help you progress in working on your project. And you can always Git also helps you kind of like work in teams and things like that, and create issues. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but it's something that you definitely have to check out. And then apart from like code, there's also design aspect. You always want to like, when you're planning things, you want to kind of understand what things are going to look like, kind of have a general idea of what you're going to build. So tools like Figma or diagrams.net help you. So the one on the left is diagrams.net. And kind of like, if you're working on some kind of backend project, building database tables can really help you kind of understand what it entails, rather than just starting to like write SQL or any other architectural patterns that you might want to like think of before you go in. Diagram.net is a great resource for you. And if you want like more front end stuff, things like you want to like kind of design what your web page might look like or your mobile app might look like, Figma is a great resource to kind of like get that design out of the way, so you kind of have a better understanding of what you want to build. Designing will save you time in development. So definitely leverage the design phase of your product as well. So yeah, the other last thing is project management. Especially if you're working on a team, it's really helpful to have some kind of like project management board, like a Kanban board, to kind of like keep track of like the tasks that you need to get done, and maybe assign it to different people in the team, or in the team that's working on the project. So look into these tools, Shortcut and Trello. These are one of my favorite ones that I like using, and they really have a really cool interface to kind of like work on a project in a team. And again, not going to go too deep into this right now, but something I'm always down to talk about if you guys are interested. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. I just wanted to point out that this particular talk is also in a written format on knowledge base. Knowledge base is basically CSOC's kind of like effort to kind of like have a base of knowledge for for Carleton in general. For now, it's more focused on tech and like engineering and things like that. We only have a few resources on there for now, but what I'm trying to do is kind of like put any workshop that CSOC hosts, I want to put on there. But ultimately, this is a community space, a kind of a repository of knowledge by the community for the community. So you guys can also always contribute to this project as well. So if there's anything that you're working on, maybe something that you learned from your hackathon today, if you want to share it, kind of like help people help other people by sharing your knowledge, this is a great place to do it. There's information on, I'll share a link as well on Discord maybe, and you guys can always check it out. There's also there's some information on how you can contribute. If you have trouble, you can always reach out to me, and I can help you guys out as well. So definitely check that out. And this talk is also in a written format on there for people who want to like read through or later, or kind of like use that as a guide to today while you're working on your projects. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for having me. I'm down to answer any questions that you guys have, or have discussions on my cat's getting to my breakfast. I'm sorry. Any questions that you might have. If you want to talk about a certain project that you're thinking to build, maybe we can brainstorm on what tools might be a cool idea for that and things like that. I'm always down to have that discussion. So yeah, questions and discussions. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Darsh, thank you so much. I think this was a really great talk going over a lot of ideas about what mistakes we make in hackathons and how you can do a little bit better. One question I have from myself is, what's the biggest mistake you've made while hacking on one of your own projects? Or when didn't you follow the rules and it came back to bite you?
For sure. I feel like, taking bigger bites than you can chew, in a sense. I feel like that can really take a toll on your whole project. I feel like keeping it simple is so important, and taking it step by step rather than trying to have the most perfect product. I think perfection is such a something that slows you down a lot in building projects. So I've definitely done that, where I'm trying to look for perfection in what I built, and spending too much time working on it, trying to make it something really, really clean, really big. Ultimately, that leads me to spending way too much time on it, getting burned out, or maybe spending too much time on something that's not as important at that point in time. So don't chase perfection. Chase progress and iteration. That's more important than actually. I'm not sure if you can see my cat, but she's really interested in my food. But yeah,
Nice.
That's something. Sorry, I'm just
perfect.
Of that.
Mm-hmm. All good. And then we have another question here. Do you recommend that we work in, for our product, we work individually or in collaboration? And what are some of the pros and cons of each?
For sure. So I feel like you should do both. Especially if it's your first project, I guess it could be a preference, but I would kind of recommend that you work in a team, just because it can be a little harder when you're working on your first project. So kind of having a support system, people to hold you accountable while working on your first project is can really go a long way. So definitely try to work in teams. I also think that personal projects are a great thing as well. A lot of companies sometimes want to specifically know what you build by yourself rather than as a team sometimes as well. So working by yourself can kind of teach you is in a way I guess gives you more freedom on the things that you want to work on, in a sense, because you don't, I guess, have team discussion on it. But some things, some projects might require a team to work on. So depending on your project, on what you kind of work on, it might be a project that suits better for your team. It might be a project that suits better for an individual person. So depending on your project, you can always take that call. But there's definitely pros and cons on each side. And I recommend that you do both rather than stick to one person, in a sense. Yeah.
Awesome. And you talked about iteration and getting feedback, but I'm wondering what the best way to go about getting feedback, when you're working maybe in a hackathon context.
For sure. In the hackathon context, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I guess one of the best parts about hackathon is the networking aspect, the fact that a group of people that have a similar interest are in the same spot. And you really need to leverage the fact, that fact, and kind of talk to as many people as you can, and kind of build relationships, because it's, you might not actually use that relationship or that connection that you built today. You might use it later in the future. Maybe you meet someone today that you might work in the future in a project with in the future, right? So be open to meeting people in hackathons, kind of talk to people, and sorry, I think I got a little sidetracked there. What was the question again?
Just sort of when you do feedback and listening,
getting feedback.
I think you covered it pretty nicely.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. Hackathon's just a day event. It's hard to get feedback in just one day, but make sure that you leverage the connection, stay in touch with those people that you talked with, and get feedback with them on a later date, maybe, right? Hackathons generally tend to be kind of a rush. People are always working on things, trying to get a version of the project out in one day, and that can be a little a bit of chaos. But meet people, get those connections, and use those connections in a later date as well. Something I would recommend.
Awesome. Well, Darsh, thank you so much. If anybody has any other questions throughout the day, or just kind of want to get some advice from Darsh, feel free to reach out to him on Discord. Darsh, will you be around all day?
I will not be, unfortunately, but I will take any questions. Like, you can always shoot me a message on Discord, or let either Forrest or Matt know, and then I can always get it from them as well. So yeah, I'll share some resources on Discord somewhere, and yeah, thank you guys for everyone for coming. I hope you guys learned something out of this.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Darsh. We will be back in just a few minutes with the next talk, which is an introduction to Svelte. So we'll see you in just a few minutes.